Julia Roberts has long been known as America's sweetheart, the radiant smile, the magnetic charm, and the undeniable talent that made her one of Hollywood's most bankable stars. From Pretty Woman to Erin Brockovich, she wasn't just an actress, she was a phenomenon. For decades, she captivated audiences with roles that blended strength, vulnerability, and warmth in a way that no one else could. She became the face of romantic comedies, the queen of box office draws, and even an Academy Award-winning powerhouse. But behind the dazzling smile and glamorous career lies a story that is far more complex and far more heartbreaking. At 57, Julia Roberts is not simply the iconic actress fans grew up adoring. She is a woman who has weathered unimaginable personal loss, professional pressures, and the cruel realities of Hollywood's unforgiving spotlight. Her journey has been filled with soaring highs and devastating lows, scandals, fractured relationships, and struggles that threatened to break her spirit. And now, as she steps into the later chapters of her life and career, fans are beginning to see the cost of decades spent under the relentless glare of fame. So what exactly happened to the woman who once defined Hollywood magic? How did Julia Roberts go from being the brightest star in the industry to carrying a legacy that feels so bittersweet? Today, we uncover the tragedy behind the legend and why Julia Roberts' story at 57 is beyond heartbreaking. Julia Roberts' journey to Hollywood greatness wasn't paved with glamour from the start. Born on October 28, 1967 in Smyrna, Georgia, Julia grew up far from the bright lights of Los Angeles. Her parents, both actors and drama teachers, divorced when she was just 4 years old, leaving her childhood marked by instability and financial struggles. Her father passed away from cancer when Julia was only 10, a devastating blow that left her with a deep sense of loss at an early age. As a teenager, Julia dreamed not of acting but of becoming a veterinarian. It wasn't until her older brother, Eric Roberts, an actor himself, began gaining traction in Hollywood that Julia entertained the idea of following in his footsteps. After high school, she moved to New York City, where she signed with a modeling agency and began studying acting. But success did not come overnight. Julia endured rejection after rejection before she landed small roles that began to hint at her potential. Her breakout moment came in 1988 with Mystic Pizza. Though the film was modest in scope, Julia's performance lit up the screen. Audiences and critics alike couldn't take their eyes off her. She had something rare, a combination of girl-next-door relatability and movie star charisma. Just 2 years later, she would become a household name with Pretty Woman. Starring opposite Richard Gere, Roberts transformed a simple Cinderella-like story into a global phenomenon. Her dazzling smile and undeniable chemistry with Gere turned the romantic comedy into one of the most successful films of the decade, grossing nearly $500 million worldwide. Almost overnight, Julia Roberts was no longer just an actress. She was a cultural icon. Tabloids followed her every move, magazines put her on their covers, and Hollywood studios lined up with scripts. Films like Steel Magnolias, which earned her an Academy Award nomination, Sleeping with the Enemy, and The Pelican Brief solidified her status as Hollywood's most bankable female star. She wasn't simply playing roles, she was shaping the idea of what a leading lady could be in the 1990s. But what made Julia stand out wasn't just her beauty or her box office draw. It was her authenticity. Unlike many of her peers, Roberts never seemed to fit into the mold Hollywood tried to cast her in. She wasn't overly polished or distant. She was warm, approachable, and refreshingly real. Her laughter, her energy, and her vulnerability resonated deeply with audiences who saw her as both glamorous and grounded. By the time she starred in Erin Brockovich in 2000, Julia had transcended the title of America's sweetheart and become a serious actress recognized by the industry. Her portrayal of the sharp-tongued, relentless legal assistant earned her the Academy Award for Best Actress, silencing critics who had once dismissed her as just another rom-com star. At that moment, Julia Roberts stood at the very top of Hollywood, an Oscar winner, a global box office force, and one of the most beloved stars of her generation. Yet, as dazzling as her rise was, The pressure of being Hollywood's golden girl was immense. Fame, while intoxicating, brought with it a darker side, one that would test Julia's resilience again and again in the years to come. Because behind the glamorous premieres and the adoring headlines, Julia's personal life was far more turbulent than her radiant smile suggested. And as we'll soon uncover, the cost of being America's sweetheart came with tragedies that fame and fortune could never erase. To the public, Julia Roberts seemed to live a charmed life. With $1 million smile, blockbuster films, and adoring fans around the world, she appeared untouchable. But beneath the glittering surface, Julia's personal journey was marked by heartbreak, loss, and difficult choices that few truly understood. Her romantic life was the first aspect of her world that the tabloids seized upon. In the early 1990s, Julia was engaged to actor Kiefer Sutherland, and their relationship was heavily scrutinized. Just 3 days before their planned wedding in 1991, Julia abruptly called it off, leaving fans shocked and the press ravenous for answers. Instead of walking down the aisle, she fled to Ireland with actor Jason Patric, fueling a media circus that painted her as unpredictable and impulsive. While Julia later described that time as one of confusion and personal growth, it cemented her reputation as someone whose love life was as dramatic as her movies. Marriage and family brought some stability, but also its share of turmoil. Julia wed country singer Lyle Lovett in 1993 after a whirlwind romance, but the marriage ended less than 2 years later. Her eventual marriage to cinematographer Daniel Moder in 2002 has lasted, but even that has been shadowed by rumors of infidelity, tension, and speculation from tabloids. Through it all, Julia maintained a protective shield over her private life, determined to shelter her children from the same relentless spotlight that defined her own career. But perhaps the deepest personal wound Julia Roberts has ever carried was the death of her half-sister, Nancy Moats, in 2014. Nancy's passing, ruled a drug overdose, shocked Julia's family, and became a painful, highly publicized tragedy. In her final note, Nancy expressed feelings of resentment and exclusion, a heartbreaking glimpse into family tensions that Julia rarely discussed. The loss left Julia devastated, and those close to her revealed that she struggled for years with guilt and sorrow over the fractured relationship. Even before Nancy's death, Julia had endured another devastating family loss. Her mother, Betty Lou Bredemus, died in 2015 after battling cancer. Julia was close to her mother, and the loss was another heavy blow that reminded her of the fragility of life. Coupled with the memory of losing her father as a child, Julia's family tragedies painted a stark contrast to her public image of constant joy. And then there was the challenge of Hollywood itself. As Julia aged, the roles that once came so easily began to dwindle. For decades, she had been the queen of romantic comedies and box office smashes. But Hollywood is notoriously unkind to women over 40. Scripts stopped pouring in, and the industry's obsession with youth left Julia fighting for parts that matched her caliber. For a woman who had once been the highest-paid actress in the world, earning $20 million per film, the sudden scarcity of opportunities was a quiet but profound heartbreak. Through it all, Julia tried to remain strong. In interviews, she often emphasized her gratitude for her family and her desire to step back from fame. Yet the struggles were undeniable. The pressures of the industry, the tragedies within her family, and the constant microscope of fame created a reality far different from the glossy headlines that once crowned her America's sweetheart, Julia. Roberts' story reminds us that even those who seem to have everything, fame, beauty, wealth, and success, are not immune to heartbreak. And as we look deeper into her life, we see that the true tragedy lies not only in her personal losses, but in the painful cost of sustaining a career in a world that demands perfection. For decades, Julia Roberts was Hollywood's golden girl. But even America's sweetheart couldn't escape controversy. The very fame that elevated her career also weighed heavily on her, creating rifts, public feuds, and moments that tested her resilience. Beneath the glamour, Julia's life in the spotlight came at a cost. One of the most infamous episodes in Julia's career was dubbed the aloe vera scandal. In the early 2000s, Julia was dating cinematographer Daniel Moder, who was still married at the time. The messy situation exploded when paparazzi photographed Julia wearing a homemade T-shirt with the words aloe vera, a pointed jab at Vera Moder, Daniel's then wife. The gesture was viewed by many as mean-spirited and unbecoming of Julia's carefully crafted image. The tabloids had a field day, portraying her as ruthless and insensitive. For a star who built her reputation on charm and warmth, this was one of the first cracks in the public's perception of her. Julia's professional life wasn't free of feuds either. She had a notoriously frosty relationship with Nick Nolte while filming I Love Trouble in 1994. Reports claimed the two couldn't stand each other, clashing on set and barely speaking off camera. Julia allegedly described Nolte as disgusting, while Nolte fired back, calling her not a nice person. The tension was so strong that producers were forced to shoot many of their scenes separately, an astonishing reality for a romantic comedy meant to showcase their chemistry. Another storm brewed with her Steel Magnolias co-star, Shirley MacLaine. Julia, who was still young and relatively new to the industry at the time, reportedly struggled with the film's intense atmosphere and MacLaine's strong personality. Years later, Julia admitted the experience left her overwhelmed, revealing just how difficult it was to establish herself among veteran actors who weren't always welcoming. Even her relationships with fellow actresses were put under a magnifying glass. Julia was long rumored to have a complicated dynamic with Susan Sarandon, though Sarandon later defended her in interviews. Her rivalry with Sandra Bullock was also a frequent tabloid topic, as both were competing for similar roles in the 1990s. Whether the animosity was real or media-fueled, Julia couldn't escape the narrative that her success came at the expense of others, and not everyone was happy about it. But perhaps the heaviest burden Julia faced wasn't feuds or scandals. It was the constant pressure of perfection. From the start, Julia was labeled America's sweetheart, a title that came with unrealistic expectations. The media scrutinized everything from her romantic life to her parenting choices. Even her appearance became a subject of debate. As she grew older, cruel commentary emerged about her looks, with critics speculating about plastic surgery and declaring that her time as Hollywood's leading lady was over. The paparazzi only added fuel to the fire. Julia, who valued her privacy, often lashed out at photographers who hounded her children. She once gave an impromptu sidewalk speech to a group of paparazzi, pleading with them to leave her family alone. Her frustration was clear. Fame may have brought wealth and status, but it robbed her of the simple joys of normal life. Through it all, Julia continued to work. But the toll of living under constant public judgment was evident. Her decision to retreat from the spotlight in the mid-2010s was, in part, a way of protecting her sanity. While fans wondered why she was taking fewer roles, the truth was that Julia had grown weary of being dissected at every turn. The controversies and feuds that followed Julia throughout her career didn't define her, but they revealed the darker side of stardom. The price of maintaining a perfect image in an imperfect world. Julia Roberts may have been Hollywood royalty, but even queens are vulnerable to scandal, criticism, and the relentless weight of fame. At 57, Julia Roberts stands at a crossroads, a woman who has lived both the dream and the nightmare of Hollywood. Though her journey has been marked by heartbreak, family tragedy, and the heavy burden of fame, she has also emerged with wisdom, resilience, and a legacy that is hard to rival. These days, Julia lives a quieter life than during her peak stardom. She spends most of her time away from Los Angeles, choosing instead the calm of New Mexico with her husband, Daniel Moder, and their 3 children. For someone who once dominated magazine covers and red carpets, Julia now seeks anonymity and peace. In rare interviews, she admits that motherhood has become her greatest role, even more important than any she has played on screen. Protecting her children from Hollywood's relentless spotlight has been her mission, a way to break the cycle of public intrusion that defined her own life. But Julia has not completely left the industry. She continues to take on selective projects that inspire her. In 2018, she starred in the Amazon Prime series Homecoming, a psychological thriller that marked her first major television role. The show earned critical acclaim and reminded audiences of her extraordinary talent, proving that even after decades in the business, Julia could still surprise and captivate. More recently, she appeared in films like Ticket to Paradise alongside George Clooney, which was celebrated for rekindling the charm of romantic comedy. These choices reflect a woman who no longer chases fame, but instead seeks fulfillment through meaningful work. Still, Julia faces the challenges that come with age in Hollywood. She has spoken candidly about the industry's obsession with youth and its tendency to sideline women after a certain age. While she continues to command respect, she is also aware that the roles once written for her are now being offered to younger actresses. For someone who spent decades as the most bankable star in the world, this reality is bittersweet. Her personal life also continues to face scrutiny. Despite years of marriage to Daniel Moder, rumors of marital discord often surface in tabloids. Julia rarely addresses them, preferring to maintain privacy, but the constant speculation is a reminder that fame never fully lets go. She has admitted that her marriage, like any long-term relationship, has its challenges, but insists that her family is her anchor in an otherwise turbulent world. In reflecting on her career, Julia has expressed gratitude for the opportunities she's had, but also an awareness of the costs. She has hinted at the loneliness of fame, the way success can isolate rather than connect. Yet she also embraces her journey, acknowledging that her experiences, both good and painful, shaped the woman she is today. Perhaps the most remarkable part of Julia Roberts' legacy is the impact she left on cinema. Few actresses have dominated the box office with the same consistency. From Pretty Woman to Erin Brockovich, her films defined an era and her performances became cultural touchstones. She showed that women could lead films, carry comedies and dramas alike, and command salaries equal to their male counterparts. For that, she remains a trailblazer, someone who paved the way for the next generation of actresses. Today, Julia Roberts is no longer the unstoppable box office queen she once was, but she has transitioned into something more meaningful, a survivor. Her life, filled with triumphs and tragedies, speaks to the resilience of a woman who refused to let Hollywood define her. At 57, her story is not just one of heartbreak. It's one of endurance, reflection, and an enduring legacy that ensures Julia Roberts will never be forgotten.